First of all, pay attention to what you're really excited about. When you show up as a designer, always try and have as much fun as possible. Find people with different skills that you can collaborate with. Without humility, then you will not really understand greatness. Yo.
Well, thanks for joining me over breakfast. So how did we meet, actually? Do you want to tell that story?
Well, we met at so I'll tell a bit of a background from my side. So I got back from Rwanda in 2015, I believe. And yeah, the design scene in Nairobi was buzzing. Design was expanding, a lot of things were going on. And around about that time, I got to know the current MD at IDEO.org, Tosh. And so we had a couple of conversations, and when I got back to Nairobi, he organized this workshop around design thinking for what's turned out to be the Nairobi Design Institute. And during that workshop, I got to meet a lot of really seasoned designers, as well as up-and-coming designers. And fortunately for me, I was in the same group as you. And that's when I got to meet you. And our relationship, it grew organically from that point, and we got to talk a lot. You mentored me through a lot of these different design disciplines and principles that I didn't know about. I was really just focused on graphic design, but I had an interest in what's out there in the world of design, and my deep passions were to find a way how design can change communities and bring in sustainability. And so that was just the birth of all that, when I realized that you understand design in a deeper context, in a deeper way. Your knowledge and depth in design was really what I needed at that point. So I think that's how our friendship started, and that's when I got to know you.
Okay, thanks for that. So how did you said you were into graphic design when we met. So how did you get into graphic design and the design in the first place?
My journey to graphic design was very interesting. I think prior to getting into graphic design, my dad is a retired photographer, and he was a photojournalist for so many years. And so I think we just grew up with that creative culture in the house, and my mom loved knitting, and it was just some creative buzz. I used to sketch a lot and draw a lot when I was a little younger, but then that kind of faded away. You get to unlearn some of these things, with the current education syllabus. But then at some point, when I finished high school, I wanted to get into photojournalism like my dad, and we had a long chat, and the final decision was no. So I had to look for something else to do, and that was film, and producing documentaries. And at that point is when my interest in that creative side of telling stories originated. But with the way things were at that point, there wasn't much to do in the world of documentaries. You had to get to a certain level and get a lot of hand holding along the way. It's not something really easy, and if you don't know the industry really well, it will take you a really long time to get to where you intend to be. So my interest in that kind of died down, and 3D animation was popping then. It was about 2009. 3D animation was really popping in Nairobi. And so I got into that, but through this institution called Shanta in Nairobi, I met a couple of designers who were 3D animation and graphic design. And so that's when I got into graphic design a lot more, and my interest grew, and I started looking for freelance gigs here and there, and that's pretty much where it all started. I stumbled upon it, so to speak.
Well, photography is a really good introduction into the creative arts, isn't it? Especially these days, it's really accessible. It gives you a good understanding of framing and rule of thirds and things like that. And
True.
it's good that you mentioned your father. I wanted to ask about him. How is he, first of all?
Dad's doing okay. He's back at the hinterlands, back in rural Kisumu, and he's just taking one day at a time. He's enjoying living in the countryside. Not doing much of photography, but we have conversations every now and again about photography, film, and what I do my day-to-day job. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I went to visit him in his studio, and we had a really good chat. So, what with some of the stuff that you've done with him and some of the chats that you've had since you've been doing design, what sort of input, what sort of stories have you got with that?
Well, I think I attribute my storytelling abilities and just general curiosity I trace it from my dad, because when he transitioned from photojournalism to a photography trainer with Kodak back in the day, he traveled a lot, and he traveled a lot in sub-Saharan Africa, training different photographers. That was back in the day when film was the in thing, and there was this one guy in the community who was known as the photographer, and they used to take pictures with tiny Kodak cameras, and my dad was assigned by Kodak to go and train those photographers so that they can, as they're earning their daily living, they can create better memories. And so he used to train a lot of photographers, but also with the training, he'd take his own pictures and use those pictures to tell stories to not only the photographers, but whenever he'd come back and he'd print out these large pictures and tell us stories about those places. And his stories are very captivating. I remember he also had like a slide projector, and we'd host visitors at our home once in a while, and he'd project it on the wall, and it was like movie time. Like the way IMAX is a big thing right now. That was the IMAX I grew up watching, too. And so he'd one slide, and he'd go on like for about 8 to 10 minutes on one slide, telling stories about that place, the people in that place, the interactions he'd have with people within that area. And later on, I didn't realize that had an impact in what I later on became to be as we speak.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like you had like full-on documentaries to yourself with him.
Yeah. Yep. I wish we filmed those sessions, because they were really lively. They were very lively.
That's the thing. I even said to my grandfather, he wasn't getting why I want to record my conversations with him. And I've just been doing it. But then I explained to him, well, Granddad, what if you could watch the conversations your granddad was having, right? Yeah. Imagine. Yeah. And we're really the first generation who gets to see people who aren't alive, I guess. Yeah. So we're one of the first anyway. So we're very, very fortunate.
It's like a catch-22 kind of situation, if you look at it from that angle, where you're the master of the craft, so why do you need someone to document what you're doing? And so
I'm interested. Tell me.
I think with a lot of people, a lot of photographers. So one of the people my dad was very fortunate to work with is the late Mohammed Amin. And he knew that his craft was very different, and the style of work he was doing was very different. So I think he got to travel with photography assistants every time he'd go out, and they document what he's doing, and he documents like what the assignment is. And so through that, there are quite a lot of pictures that show Mohammed Amin live in action, and then you can also see the pictures that he was taking while he was on assignment. But he had a strategy. He was very forward thinking. There are not many people who do that or who did that back in the day. Right now is when I'm seeing through documentaries and pictorial and video documentaries that people are taking time to, tell the story through what their assignment is, but also have other people document what they are doing. And I think that's where some of the greatest stories lie, where you get to see the person and how they react to when they're in assignment, and how that assignment affects them and how they approach it, their techniques to approaching. It's just like one example. So if there was this one documentary I watched, and it's this guy who was documenting a death that happened, a strange death that happened within a village in Latin America, South America. And he was with his assistant, and the assistant was filming him trying to have a conversation with the people there, is like almost coming down to their level, that humility and that empathy. When you see it live in action and you get to understand how to even approach it, you're inspired by how he takes the time to really empathize with the people and get permission. And I think part of the process of getting consent to talk to people is showing them the empathy, that you're really there to listen to them. They are the experts, and you're there just, as this bridge to listen to their stories and have them inspire some creative solutions. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's something I was thinking about as well, as if we can, again, back to that conversation with my grandfather. He said, that, people, he's a model maker, so people, don't appreciate the art of cutting anymore. And I said, well, the art of cutting that's just a process. It's a tool that you're using to get to the end result. And again, if I'd given you laser cutting 50 years ago, you may have been able to expand model making in other fields rather than that particular or another thing. And it's almost like the skills of a master aren't contained within the toolkit. It's beyond that. You want to understand what the master is thinking and how their approach to life affects their process, right?
Yeah. I like that. And that's part of the journey to mastery, really, where it's not just about the craft, but it's also the dedication, the effort, the time that you put into the craft, and what goes on through the motions, because you can be affected externally and also internally. And so how do you navigate through those motions and let that guide you to being a master at your craft? Yeah.
So as you learned about design, you did some freelancing work, right? You were kind of doing things and picking up projects and doing your own kind of conceptual projects, right? And then you ended up at Nairobi Design Institute. So how did that happen?
Well, that journey was a really interesting journey. I think the pivotal point to how it transitioned into CDs when I worked at Nation Media Group, when I worked as a graphic designer with the marketing department. And I realized that the print, the graphics I was creating that were going to print, there's a way that they had an effect on the people who were consuming them. And so that got me really curious. It's like, how does the colors I create and the look and feel, like influence someone's behavior, decision-making process? And that was like, oh, okay, so it's not just about creating print and beautiful, colorful artwork. There's something more to it. There's a behavior side that exists. And that really sparked, like, working very closely with the marketing department was one of the best things that ever happened. And that was now like how I transitioned. And so I started getting more curious and digging deeper into that. And then conversations with you and understanding more about design. And then we had conversations about how to get into HCD work, and you introduced me to the folks at Thinkplace. And Thinkplace was when I transitioned now from graphic design now into design thinking and the whole HCD world in Nairobi. And that was when I transitioned. From that point, I worked with Thinkplace for about 7 to 8 months, and I really wanted to, satisfy my curiosity by understanding what's the full extent of the process. How do you get from, inspiration into implementation, and what are the guiding principles that help you navigate through all these steps of design? And that's how I got into NDI, through quite a number of conversations with Tosh, actually, when he introduced what NDI was about and what he wanted it to be. And we were the the guinea pigs, so to speak, because I was the part of the first cohort, together with a couple of other brave souls. And we boarded that mission. And that was one of the best experiences I can say I've had as a student of the discipline, but also as a designer, like trying to get deeper into the craft and satisfying that curiosity of understanding how can my work, help change the narrative for people in the community and in the different communities that I'm designing with, not for. I always like to think like I'm designing with people and not just for the people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was when all that started happening, and a lot of cooking was happening in the process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. It's always about designing with people, and I guess, like you said, you kind of went through that as you went from Nation Media to Thinkplace, and then fully on board as you went to NDI.
Yes. Yeah.
So what did you learn at NDI?
Quite a lot of things, actually. I think what I knew from Thinkplace was really, really good at laying the foundation of what the process, design thinking, and HCD is. But getting into NDI, I started getting into the territories that are not the comfortable zones, because I'm really good at talking to people and conducting interviews. But then there's the thinking aspect of like, okay, so we have this data, and how do we use this data to guide us into ideation, where you start creating ideas and concepts, and now testing them with back and forth before you get into implementing a solution, or before you get into recommending a set of solutions that would work for people. So that bit post field research was where I think I wasn't pretty confident at. And also design, leadership, it's like taking an active role at guiding teams and team members to how do we get to the next step. How do we like in the incremental steps you take to getting to the final part of a project. And why another thing I learned was why reviews are really important throughout the design process. Why you need to go back and forth with the project lead and with your teammates before you take on the next step, because you might assume that, oh, I've done this really cool thing, this is it. And then you take it to the project lead and you're like, I think we have it. And, he or she comes back at you with hard-hitting questions and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. And so those reviews where it's not about perfection, but it's about getting to, like not really tailor, but check on where you're at, and so that you don't go too deep into whatever you're working on, and you end up missing out on so many things that really need to make the solution or the set of solutions healthy enough for the final product, or for the final solution, service, whatever it is that you're aiming to design.
Was there a project at NDI where you really felt, or maybe beforehand, but where you really felt that now I'm really getting this design thinking?
Mm-hmm. So I'd worked with marketing department at Nation Media, but I never knew that design could have a very important integral part in creating marketing campaigns. So there was this one project that we worked on with one of my good friends, Nairobi Design Institute, called Hulita, another great designer. And it was creating a marketing campaign for Moja Wi-Fi. And Moja was a product by Brick, which is a local startup. And so they were launching these bricks that would go into, PSVs like matatus, and they had it provides Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi to whoever gets into that matatu that has Moja Wi-Fi on it. And they had a lot of content that they were also pushing to the users, and really cool features of how people can use the platform. But the thing that was the missing gap was, how do we get this really cool, amazing product to the people without spending a ton of money on adverts that don't really make sense and don't really communicate to the users that we're looking to communicate with. And so that was, I think, what we call baptism by fire into really understanding HCD and how HCD can be that tool that could help you get to really close to the users and also get the product really close to the people's hands, but also understanding how design works from end to end. That was that one project that I was like, okay, now I get it. Now I get it. And it was amazing to see how research led into prototyping, led into implementing or recommending a set of solutions that was back to Brick. This is what you can implement. And the team at Brick was really excited to see how research shaped the marketing campaign. Because traditionally, a lot of times, people who are in the marketing field approach marketing with like very traditional, traditional principles that are not updated and don't really speak to the people that you're trying to, target. And so we broke down the different types of users. That's something that even I was not really familiar with, like how, breaking down the different archetypes and the different personas can have an effect on the shape of a campaign. And so we started understanding, okay, so this is this persona, this is how these are their behaviors, this is what they look for when they go and browse, and this is how you target them.
Mm-hmm.
And we broke it down for the different personas, and we used different matrix to map out how to do that in a very structured way over a period of time. And that, I think that was the point where we were like, okay, now I get it. Now I totally understand how this thing works. So just a couple of more projects and I'll start getting more confident at understanding the craft better and being a better designer.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Yeah, the target market and getting insights on the actual people using what you're designing is one of the most important things, isn't it? And those assumptions that we make as humans, can you think off the top of your head any of the assumptions that you've made, maybe during that project or another one, that shocked you or surprised you?
Yeah, I think some of the assumptions we made were personally like guilty as charged, is that marketing, placing marketing material at, places like vibandas where they sell grocery alongside the road might not have an impact. People will pass them by. if you don't communicate with the people on ground onto like about this is what the product is about and this is how you can benefit from using it, then it's that doesn't have an impact. We don't need to talk to them. But then we realized that through research that these people who are close to where a lot of traffic happens, a lot of traffic is rather, they're the ones who spread the word, and they do most of the marketing for you in a very organic way. And so getting them on board, first of all, excites them. It's like, oh wow, you care about me. Okay, so what is this? And you walk them through it, and they're like, oh, okay, now I get it. Oh, so I can do, okay, cool. I'll tell my customers. And they have probably about 50 customers, 30 to 50 customers on any given day. And now that was, something that really surprised me. I was like, oh wow, we normally overlook, I used to overlook these people in the past and, rush to social media influencers. But I realized that, you can work with people in the community and they can also do that word of mouth marketing for you in a very organic way. And once you empower them and onboard them, they're really excited to do it and they feel part of the process. So that was something that really surprised me. And I was like, okay, the research is really important to understand how, people can be influential and what role people play within the community. Different people play within the community. Yeah.
And it's about understanding those relationships, right? And like you said, the influencers can be for every product, every service, the influencers are different people, right?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so just to add on to what you said, it reshaped the meaning of what an influencer is. Prior to that, I was conditioned to thinking that an influencer only exists on the phone, right? On social media. But then there are, the community influencers who have a role to play, and they're really powerful on ground. And without, identifying them and talking to them and making sure that they're part of the process, then whatever you're trying to do on ground might not take off at all.
So then, well, first of all, Moja, well done, and well done on all the projects that you did at NDI. And also, you mentioned Julita, and she was, of course, at NDW at the same time. So going through a double design education. So well, I wanted to ask you actually about, you've mentioned Tosh, who brought you in, who's the founder of NDI, and he's now also at IDEO.org, where you work. So, so maybe tell us about Tosh and how he's gotten you involved in these awesome things.
Yeah. So I got to Tosh is, first of all, this character. A lot of people know him in the tech scene, in the design scene, in Nairobi, and I think in many parts of East Africa. But Tosh, so I got to know Tosh while he was working at iHub, and he used to organize a lot of these events, community events for techies and designers. And he was a manager community manager at iHub. And I used to frequent that place when I started transitioning into design thinking. And that's what I got to know about him, but we never really spoke at that point. Where we started talking a lot is when he got into Dalberg design and progressed as a designer to a creative lead over the period of about 3.5 years, I think. And during that time I'd ask him occasionally on Messenger, like, how do I get to know more about this, and those conversations sparked something that made me more curious about design thinking and HCD. And through the workshop that he invited me, we got to speak up a lot more after that. And when I got into Thinkplace, a couple of months after I joined Thinkplace, he asked me how my experience was, and we got to dig deeper. And he asked me a couple of questions that were like, okay, so have you done this? What projects have you done? What have you? Where are you in this field of design? What are you confident at? Do you know this? Do you know about this? And some of them were really, I was blank. It's like, what? And he's like, well, there's this program that I'm starting at. It's called Nairobi Design Institute. And the aim is to, empower people who are already in design to get to the next level of being creative leaders and design leaders, and also understanding the design process end to end, in a nutshell. But it was a sermon. I think that conversation was more like a sermon. And so when I got into Nairobi Design NDI, it was one of the rarest occasions of actually working with him closely, because he was a very busy person. He rarely had time before that. So whenever projects would come in, whenever projects came in, and he'd come into the school, the institute, I got to see him live in action and see how he thinks about, where we're at, and he wants us to really be thoughtful designers when we take on different parts of the process. And through that, he personally pushed me, being more rigorous with the work that I do, and also just having fun with the process, because I thought I was really scared at first when I started. I was like, what is this? I don't understand. a lot of things were Greek, but there's a certain way that he helps us approach design like a dance, having a dance, with design, where you get to learn the steps and then master the steps, master how the room is, the setup of the room, and now just glide around. And through that, we became more and more confident at design and at approaching the process. The crafts, also building on different crafts that we had in different skills. So like I saw where my skill as a graphic designer came into play when we were introduced to UI, user interaction design. And suddenly I was interested in something else, which was really exciting. And that I can say those are some of the benefits of going through NDI.
Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate enough to attend your graduation and the one of the following year as well, the following cohort. And then you very quickly moved to IDEO.org, right? So
yeah.
You've been there how long now?
1 year. So my first part was 8 months, and now 11. Wait. So I joined in March 2019. Yeah, and we're in September right now. Wow. Okay, time has really gone by quick. Yeah. So yeah, I've been. Yeah, it's almost 2 years. It's getting to 2 years.
You're working mostly remotely right now, right?
Yeah. Yes, I am. And I think it's really been exciting working remotely. And the thing about IDEO.org is that the team is made up of very senior, experienced designers and designers who have different abilities and skill sets, and just very passionate on in different ways. And we're all in one space. And the thing about that is that the sharing of resources and the sharing of ideas is so, I can't compare that experience to anything that I've been through in the past. You are exposed to things that are very high level and also very mature and seasoned designers, but still very humble. in how they approach day-to-day activities and how they approach design. Always eager to learn and try new things and push the crafts, a step further. So that's what I really enjoy about being at IDEO.org.
Mm. So as you've transitioned from into a full-time design role like this one, what have some of the things been that have surprised you compared to before?
Oh, okay. So before, there were certain things I knew about, certain crafts that I knew about design, like user interaction design, UX, product design. But my current role at IDEO.org is design researcher. And, I approached it in a very, not in the most rigorous of ways initially when I started. I just thought it was all about, creating a discussion guide, finding out where we can talk to people, setting up those interviews and talking to them. And voila, that's it. But the craft itself, design research, is falling in love with every other day, where you realize that the importance of a design researcher to a team is this is the person who understands who you're designing for and empathizes with who you're designing for and with. But not only that, they're able to bring in those user stories to inspire solutions, to inspire ideas that will help or motivate the design team to push the ideas a step ahead and really think through, are these the things that we should be focusing on right now? And a design researcher as well asks the right questions that will guide the teams to thinking through what do we need to focus on right now? What can we leave out? How do these insights guide the storytelling of how we got to where we are right now? Mm-hmm. And this is a skill a lot of designers can adopt, but then this primary custodian of that is lies with the design researcher. And so that means that a design researcher has to be really interested in these stories and in these insights and really curious at the same time. And that curiosity drives them to inspire the design team to think about how to get deeper and look at different ideas more holistically, but also how to prioritize what to focus on and when to narrow down on these different ideas.
Could you give me an example of somewhere you've implemented that?
Yeah, so I think most recently with the shift in working remotely, we were working on one project that looked at designing how to get digital financial services to people living in rural parts of Kenya, in specific locations where tech is low, literacy is low. And so how do you empathize with these people? By exploring what's been done before in other parts. And so if this is what's been done, how can that inspire us, the design team, to think about, healthy ways of prototyping some of these ideas that we had based on the insights that we created from research. So these are the insights we gathered. These are the ideas that cropped up from synthesis. And so these ideas, we want to prototype them with the people. And so we think through the ideas, prioritize, how do we approach these different ideas in the field with the partners that we're working with. So the partners will have their people on ground. So the design researcher will try and understand who are the people that you're working with on ground. What's their level of literacy? What's their level of understanding tech comprehension? How often do they use tech? Okay, so if that's the case, then how do we work with them in a way that they are comfortable and they're excited to prototype these ideas with the people in the community? And it was really beautiful to see that happening in motion. And so we had to really simplify some of the ideas that were really, we were really excited. Some ideas we were really excited about had to, be put aside. It's like, no, that's too complicated for the people that we want to prototype with. So we had to make some of the ideas that the partner was excited about, and also members of the team were excited, the design team were excited about, make them better and really well thought out in terms of even the structure. Like if these are the things, the assets that require printing, how will we print them? How will we take them? How will we make sure that the people we're working with in the community get them safely? And then how will we prototype them? How will we create, moments of downloading what they've learned and make them feel that, make them know that they are either giving us what we need or they're missing out on some of the questions that we really want to understand deeply. And it can be quite challenging, but again, it goes back to something that I mentioned earlier. If you approach it like a dance, then you realize that it's not about hitting that technique immediately. You need to understand how it all works out. You need to understand the movements, the different moving parts, and then get dancing. Don't wait to be told to to start the dance. Just get into it, and then things will fall into place, and you're allowed to allow yourself as a designer to fall forward, make mistakes and learn from it quickly, and not be very fixated on like, oh, I made this mistake, I feel so horrible about it. It's okay, but what can you do better on the next time? And really trusting the team that you're with to guide you into like, okay, so how can we make this part of the process really good and really impactful, and also get it to the people in the simplest way possible, in a way that we'll learn a lot from them and they'll also be excited to share with us those learnings.
Yeah, prototyping, you've mentioned it a few times there, and it's really, really a great thing to be prototyping in the field, and it's so interesting to have to find the materials and resources that you need for that particular project. Have you had any super interesting prototypes that you've had to make do with? Improvise.
Yeah. There was this one project where we had to create what's called sacrificial concepts in the field with messaging for one campaign that focuses on early child development. And so the thing about it is that we were trying to understand which messages resonate with caregivers, and we had a couple of caregivers in the room, and we had different messages, so it was like a walkthrough. So we show them some messages and we ask them, what does this mean to you? And we started learning a lot, and it was just printouts, and you just lift up the printout and they read it and they're like, what does this mean to you? What do you see when you close your eyes? What do you see? What type of image do you see? How does it make you feel? And that inspired, the visual direction, that inspired the type of colors we use. And so very quickly, with a comms designer, very brilliant comms designer called Zach Adero, we're able to put together some concepts for in a very short period of time, a very short turnaround time, and take them out to the field and test them, and then tested them with a different set of users, and also part of the previous users that we had in that interview. And just getting that feedback and getting those learnings and insights, whatever we're trying to communicate, are people understanding it, or is the messaging lost in through different things that we're putting together? And so that was really amazing. It was really amazing to see how prototyping rapidly as well gets you to understanding a lot about the users, but also about the ideas that you're putting together.
Prototyping's super useful. And what you've mentioned some of the people you've worked with at IDEO as well. I know you've got a few people a good few people, really more than a few people to look up to there. Tell me about the people you've been learning from at IDEO and how they've helped you.
Well, there's the structures in IDEO are set up in such a way that it's easy for you to really push your craft to the next level if you really want to do that. And once you start to know who's different people and what their skills are and how they show up within a team, then it's upon me as Don to have those conversations with them and learn from them on a one-on-one, but also projects changing different people within a project, within different projects, so you don't work with the same set of people all the time, but you get a mix of different skills and different crafts at different projects. That really pushes your skills as a designer and your craft in whatever design discipline that you're focused on. There are a couple of people that I'm always excited to work with, interaction designers, because they bring in a very playful approach to prototyping and also design research. I was initially, when I started, my approach was really very rigid, but then working with interaction designers, they opened my understanding. Like, you can approach design research in, add some play to it, and you'll see that your learnings and your insights can be very exciting, and even the participants are really excited to be part of it, because a lot of times during design research, most of the times it's just some guy sitting down and answering to questions that you're asking, and it can get really boring and stale. But if you add some play to it, but really well thought out activities, it just changes the whole atmosphere, and people are just more willing to give you more. Other designers I'm excited to work with are comms designers, because when you're out in the field or when you're conceptualizing, they are very quick at like putting the visuals together and representing what you're trying to create in quick visuals that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's try and work with that and see how people will react to that. That's really exciting. The people that I am starting to really understand how their craft affects my craft, or affects how my craft plays a role in different parts of the process, is business designers, because they come heavy during ideation and implementation. When it's a solution, you're trying to think about, okay, so how do we push this to scale? But then me as a design researcher, how do the insights and the stories that we heard in the field inspire that scaling? Yeah. and it's really exciting to see how those different crafts in a way come together and cross-pollinate. So business designers are very, very interesting, very thorough. Well, they're really well thought out in their approach, and just the amount of rigor that they put into the work that they do also is quite inspiring to how I approach, how I show up as a designer. Yeah, yeah. So I can say, honestly, I can say it's these different crafts and these different skills tend to inspire me in one way or another. But those ones naturally I just gravitate to working with, especially if we're starting on a new project, and how their skills can inspire how I approach, the inspiration parts of the process. Yeah, yeah.
So you've touched on your design journey and how that's shaped you. So have you got any kind of tips for designers on their design journey and how to open up and let it shape you?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things I've learned while at IDEO.org is, first of all, pay attention to what you're really excited about. And that will shape how you show up as a designer. So for example, in my case, I'm really excited. I'm passionate about, understanding, like, there's the curiosity, the natural curiosity in me drives the way I show up as a designer every day. And that's also helped me develop my skills in asking the right questions, asking good questions. So if you're naturally curious, that will shape how you show up, and it will shape your skills. It will shape you understanding, becoming better at being empathetic. But also there are people who are also excited about making the best or the baddest posters and logos, just to excite people and stimulate people visually. If that's what drives you, then let that be the thing that you want to be better at each and every time. But which brings me to the other point is collaborate. Find people with different skills that you can collaborate with, and show them whatever you're working on. Let them walk them through what you're thinking, what the process is, whatever you're trying to get to. Let them build you and make, inspire you to look at things from a different angle, or from different angles that you might have missed initially, or you might have overlooked. And collaboration is really important. Sometimes some cultures are set up in a way that you might think that if I show this person what I'm working on, they'll steal it. But I mean, if you're really confident what you're doing and you're really excited about what you're doing, then the idea is yours. You collaborating with other designers will just strengthen your resolve and your determination to make whatever you're working on better. So don't fear your idea being stolen, or it's actually, they say it's flattery in a way. If someone steals your ideas, it's some form of flattery, but let that also push you into becoming better at it. It's like, oh, so you took that and you thought you can get that far with it. I'll show you, that I'm on a different tangent and this is what I'm aiming at. And I think the other thing that I'm starting to really gravitate towards is when you're working as, when you show up as a designer, always try and have as much fun as possible. Try and have as much fun as possible. Like, I've seen designers who are really rigid. I was there before. And being rigid can be very frustrating to a team, and the team might not know how to tell you because they think you're like a really stuck up person. But if you're not flexible, if you don't give yourself that room to, like, okay, let's try out different things. I'm really excited to try this. I'm excited to try this. You will not enjoy the process as much. You'll always think that it's one way and it's one way only. And this is the way I know. But if you prototype with your craft, and this is something that I learned from Jane Fulton Suri. She told me that even as you approach your craft, try and prototype how you want to approach it. Don't just approach it. Don't be too comfortable with how you're used to approaching your craft each and every day. Have you tried something else? Have you tried another way of approaching it? Given that it's a different project, so you will not use the same principles on a different project that's touching on different people and affecting different people.
Mm-hmm.
Try and prototype a different strategy of how to approach your craft, and that means that you just relax, have fun.
I like that. That's really important. And have you got any, off the top of your head, any quick tips for how designers can make their work and their approach more fun and less rigid? Or how you did it?
How I did it. Over time, I've been collecting different methods on design research, and you can go on to designkit.org. It has so many methods and so many methods on how to approach design research, for example. And those methods can inspire you to, like, okay, so if this is a different project and given the context, I don't really know much about it, let me try out, before we even start recommending like what we want to do, let's throw out 4 or 5 different methods. This is how we want to approach design research for this particular project. And, brainstorm with the team, have a go, think about, make sure that the project lead, has his or her input on that. And then, put all these together and stage them. It's like, okay, so day 1 we'll try this, day 2 we'll try this, day 3 we'll try. And so it's not so rigid. Each and every day, you're always trying something new and you're learning differently each and every time. And so that just makes your approach more flexible and more fun.
Nice. So actually, I just wanted to come back to something, because you talked about sacrificial concepts earlier. I wanted you to explain, for those who don't know, what a sacrificial concept is.
It's almost pretty self-explanatory. It's a concept that you're putting up there and you're like, hey, what's your reaction to this? And it's a principle that I use when creating sacrificial concepts, is that you don't make it's put some thought into it, but don't put too much to it, such that it will not confuse the person who's looking at it. If the aim of your sacrificial concept on like stage on the first day is get people to react to the visuals, like photography, don't try and add so many things, words, color, and all that stuff. Just get people to look at the picture, get people to tell you what they think about the picture, and then that could inspire, what words can I add? Day 2, add some words to it. Get people. So it's sacrificial concepts, and you have a couple of them. If you have 2 sacrificial concepts, then you're not thinking. You're really rigid, or you're not spreading your ideas, or you haven't explored enough to get as many users will start this for you. You don't need to think about, what do I leave? What do I take to the next? Let the users guide you. Let the users be the ones to make some of these decisions for you and help, because essentially you're designing with them, not for them.
So you've mentioned Jane Fulton, you've mentioned Design Kit. I know that about a year ago, probably, we sat down and had a really good chat about kind of put out
behind that board.
On this board, right? I had a good chat about like a design bookshelf, right? And you asked me what resources do designers need going in. So out of that list that you've put together and now had a year to digest that, what are your top recommendations?
Off the top, this book, Creative Confidence. I always have it next to me, because I think there's some principles that are really cool in here about how to, step up as a creative leader. Designkit.org, that's like, I go back to it every now and again, because it has some methods that I've started learning how to changing apart the methods to suit whatever I'm trying to learn. So I don't take the method in its entirety. I might be inspired by one or two things about that particular method, and I want to use it, but stage it differently. And then another book that I'm really interested is This is Service Design Doing. I love this book because design research and in its approach is, very related to like service design and how you approach like this is also a personal interest. I love service design, and how I strengthen my craft as a design researcher is also looking at some of the principles within service design. And that's helped me, add more rigor to the craft and try and document as much as possible, because service design prompts you to be really thorough at how you document and look at, explore different things, but really dig in documentation. And that's something that I encourage a lot of designers, up and coming designers, to start deepening their craft, is be really good at documenting.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we just, write down the insights, the findings, but we don't take enough time to document. So how was my approach in this particular project? What stories did I gather, and what inspiring stories can I write for the different designers within the team to use to inspire, as the project continues developing. So service design in a way has helped me get to that next level of documenting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Any others, or those two specifically?
These two specific. Okay. There's a.
I see your desk is full of good literature. That's why I'm curious. I'm asking for more.
Oh my days! I think
interview
the green
guide?
screen.
Interview.
Interviewing users. Yeah. This is a really cool book. It has how to uncover compelling insights. Amazing book. Interviewing users. It's a really cool book. I've used it a couple of times, and there's some really interesting principles that I had overlooked in the past, that this book brings them together and helps me. There are a couple of other IDEO.org books and IDEO books that I don't have on this on my table, but they're in a different part of the room. I also refer to those ones once in a while. But then the last one I think is this travel pack kit by IDEO.org. This is it. it has a lot. It's structure. It's a really thought out travel pack.
Okay.
It's in here. It's really nice.
Nice. So you had that interviewing users book. Have you got any examples of interviews? Obviously, you can't talk about the specifics, but how those interviews have really touched you? Because I know there's a few from my time in the field that just stand out when someone asks me.
Examples of how some
interviews that have really touched you with people and kind of maybe even changed the way you think.
Yeah, I think one project that we worked on in Uganda, touched me a lot deeply, is we were talking to caregivers and male caregivers in this instance, and how they're involved in their parenting, and what interest they have with their kids, especially in the very important stages of from birth to 3 years, whether they know the things that the children need in terms of vaccines and like going to hospital, clinic visits, the number of vaccines that they get. And so how do we inspire these male caregivers to be more involved with that, and breaking through, first of all, understanding the cultural constraints that exists within those communities and the role of men and how men are viewed. But then how do you uh, how do you inspire men to look at their roles a bit more differently and be more attentive and engaged caregivers, and not just passive caregivers in a way, and that talking to them and really understanding like the context that they exist in, the cultural constraints, and the way the culture is set up was a really inspiring. It was a really inspiring experience, and talking to those men helped me see that the way cultures are set up can, inhibit some solutions that you really think these are the ideal set of solutions to take off. And so you have to go back to the drawing board, think again, how do we get these users, these male users, to be more engaged, and how do we get them to be more excited about being parents, and not just being the dominant man by the outward appearance of like, I have 1 or 2 wives and 6, 8 children, and that makes me a man. Changing that narrative, but in a very organic way, without really disrupting anything. You don't want to come in as a disruptor. That leaves a very bad effect in the community. And that's the thing as a design researcher, is that I'm always, I find myself getting caught in between. I find this is what's going on in the community. I feel it's not right, but these are my biases. So I have to suppress my biases to understand how are these communities existing with the current cultural constraints or like cultural setups, and how do I design around that? And it's a really interesting way to navigate around it, because initially I used to let my biases, even the way I structured discussion guides was very biased to like, I think this is right because I know this is right. But then again, no, the user is right in the context that they exist. So how do you approach them from that common ground? What's the common ground that you establish? And that means that I have to take enough time to understand that community or the communities that I want to go, and the people existing in those communities before I get to the field. And yeah, that for me has really been inspiring, and the modern years that I've been.
Sorry, I lost the last sentence after inspired you a lot, but you didn't.
Yeah, inspired me a lot into how I approach design research.
Okay. And what about your last one? So you've mentioned your culture, and I know you're a religious guy as well. So how has your culture and your faith, how have they made you a better designer?
Oh yeah, I think religion, my faith has played a big part in how it affects my how I show up as a designer, not just being a designer, but how I show up. There is humility that we're always constantly reminded to, humility and love. And it's some of the biggest qualities that I aspire to getting better at over time. But also, these are some things, these 2 qualities are some of the most overlooked by people around us. There's always a spirit of competition. There's a spirit of me first and not others first. And as a design researcher, you kind of let your biases go and think of the users, think about the users, think about the partners. You're not in the equation. You become that bridge, or that dot connector to the lives of people and the solution. And so you really have to. I really have to love the people that that I'm working with, and also the teams that I work with. The craft. I need to love the craft. I need to also approach it in a humble way. Without humility, then you will not really understand greatness.
Wow, thank you. Thanks for that.
Yeah. No
So,
problem.
anything else you wanted to add or ask or put to the community?
Man, I look forward to doing this again. I think today was the first time doing a podcast. So yeah. But I think one of a big shout out to you, Adrian, and Nairobi Design Week, NDW, the work that you've done and that you keep on doing. You're inspiring a lot of designers. I've been part of the process, and so I can, clearly call out like this. These are some of the things that I have benefited from just by closely associating with NDW and also with Adrian and the community of designers around NDW. And I think some of the highlights that I've been seeing lately and over the period of time that we've interacted is rigor, the amount of rigor and passion that you and the collective at NDW have for design, and what you believe design can do to shape the narrative or the different narratives that exist within the continent. And so just keep doing what you're doing. Can't wait to see the next chapter. There's always a next chapter with every time we talk, and I'm like, okay, interesting. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, super inspired, man. Yeah.
Thank you, Don. Where can people find your work?
Sometimes I tell my stories on Instagram, Adero, Don Adero. LinkedIn, the same, Don Adero. I'm starting to get a bit more frequent with my LinkedIn posts. I listen to a lot of design podcasts. So every once in a while, I'll update something that I've listened to and that I find inspiring from a design podcast. I think I'll also encourage people to just a quick list of design podcasts that anyone who's listening to can go and have a look at. Creative Confidence podcast by IDEO. There's Design Details, and there is Clever, a podcast about design. Those three. There's User Defenders, but I don't listen to it often. Oh yeah, and the last one, Design Matters, with Debbie Millman. Yeah. Design Matters is amazing. So yeah, those are the podcasts that if you're really passionate about design and you want to know a thing or two about the crafts or about different disciplines, listen to those podcasts. I will not tell you the other podcasts I listen to. They're really funny. Okay. That's a conversation for another day.
I feel like we should definitely have a separate conversation just about podcasts, because we both consume a lot of this content, and I'm currently working on a list as well of design and creative podcasts that we'll be releasing. So there's a lot. I mean, the ones you mentioned, of course, Debbie Millman is like an OG when it comes to design. So that's really a great one. 99% Invisible is the one I have to listen to every week. That's the one I have to listen to.
I have it. Yeah, I have that too. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you, Don. Right. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Adrian. This is great. Next time I'll not come straight from workouts into a podcast.
It's easy. Thank you, man. You have a good day, and we'll do this again soon.
Yes, definitely. Enjoy your day, man.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Cheers. All right.